for the two-minute writing exercises today, I want to look at the theme of permission. This theme comes up so much in my work with writers and artists. This idea that there's something we really want to do and yet we're not quite able to do it, and then someone gives us the permission to do it. So when I worked at a retreat for writers, it was often a professional writer giving a less experienced writer that permission to really go for the project, to really write that book. But as you know, life coaching, and often the themes that I talk about, is all about bringing the power back to ourselves. So I want to look at how we can give ourselves permission. So we don't have to rely on anybody else. We don't need anybody else to tell us, yes, you can write this thing that you want to write about, or yes, you can create this piece of art that's been going around in your mind. You can say that to yourself and you can just go on and get ahead with it. So the inspiration for the exercises that we're doing today have come from a lovely quote from this gorgeous book. So I know that I've talked about the Paris Review before, and I've talked about their anthologies of the full interviews that they give. So this chapbook is essentially filled with quotes, and all of the quotes has come from the interviews. And they're sections out into themes throughout the book. So this is a quote from quite early on in the book. I've only just got this, so I'm just dipping into it. When I read this one, I thought I have to bring this one into Writing Weekend. So this is a quote by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who, for those of you who don't know, writes about magic realism. So his work is really breaking boundaries. He brings these magical qualities into an almost everyday reality. So it really surprised me that he needed permission to go into this territory. I just kind of assumed that he just did it. But no, Gabriel Garcia Marquez needed permission. So I'm going to read to you the quote and then I'm going to start the exercises with you. One night, a friend lent me a book of short stories by Franz Kafka. I went back to the pension where I was staying and I began to read The Metamorphosis. The first line almost knocked me off the bed. I was so surprised. The first line reads, "As Gregor Samsa awoke that morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a giant insect." When I read that line, I thought to myself that I didn't know anyone was allowed to write things like that. If I'd known, I would have started writing a long time ago. So I immediately started writing. So how wonderful. He read something and it showed him that this is the kind of thing that you're allowed to write about. So permission. The first exercise that I want to look at is the ways that we're not allowing ourselves. So what are we telling ourselves that we can't do? So what are you telling yourself that isn't allowed in your own work? So maybe your work is to write, maybe your work is as an artist, it's to sculpt or to paint, or maybe your work is more of a business nature. Whatever your work is, there is often an area that you're not allowing yourself to go. You're telling yourself that's not allowed. And that comes from way back, from when we were kids and we learnt this idea of right or wrong, that there are rules that you're not allowed to break. So whatever your work is, get clear about the topic that you want to look at in your work. What are you telling yourself isn't allowed in your work? 2 minutes, I'm going to write with you, and the clock starts now. Okay, 2 minutes. How did you get on? What were you telling yourself that you are not allowed to do in your work? So I put, and actually for this, I wasn't focusing on my writing, I was focusing on my work as a life coach. The things that aren't allowed in my work are goofiness, rudeness, bearing all. So as I wrote, I was surprised by what I was writing, and also I realised that I was telling myself I can't be unprofessional, but that I didn't really know what that meant. It was a very vague, I can't be unprofessional. And also I put, doesn't this mean that I can't be myself? Because am I entirely professional? So I put, I'm telling myself that I can't completely let go. Go this far, but not this far. So everywhere I looked, there was a boundary, and all that boundary said was you can't fully be yourself. So I really got this idea that how can permission come if I'm only letting myself get this far? So essentially what then happens is somebody else comes along and then shows me that it's okay to go that little bit further. So if somebody else shows me that it's okay, there must be a way that I can do that myself. There must be a way that says, hey, if you want to be goofy today, there is a way to do that that is going to be totally possible. So permission. I want to take this a little step further. So we've now had a look at some of the things that we're not letting ourselves do, either in our writing or in our art or in our business. But now I want to look at how we can begin to give ourselves that permission to go that extra step, to really put our full selves into our projects. Gabriel Garcia Marquez has made a complete name for himself by that magical realism that he didn't dare do. Thank God he did. So what is it that we're not daring to do that the world is one day going to be super grateful for? Okay, so the second exercise, what would you be doing in your work if you had your permission? So I'm asking you to go that place, to give yourself the permission. I want you to find that power within yourself. So perhaps you imagine giving yourself permission in the way that someone might give to you, but essentially you're the ones giving yourself the permission. What would you be doing in your work if you had your permission? So feel that permission that you would give to yourself, and spend 2 minutes exploring what would you be doing in your work if you had that permission from yourself. Off you go. Okay, there we go, 2 minutes. So how was that? How was that to give yourself the permission and to explore where that permission takes you? So again, I continued with my life coaching hat on rather than my writer's hat. I put the very first line, if I had my permission, I would be laughing. And I could really feel that sense of relief, that sense that it's something that I love to do, so I would do that a lot more. I put, I would feel free. I would look at my audience and I would know that it was okay. I would be doing something that felt true. And then I came to an analogy. I then imagined myself climbing that fence and being in the field beyond. And then I thought, the moment I climbed that fence and I was in the field beyond, I wouldn't remember why that fence was there. So there wouldn't be a sense of, oh God, it's really scary to be in this field. I've overstepped that boundary. I knew that as soon as I stepped over that boundary, the boundary would seem trivial, so much so that I would forget the reason that it was even put up in the first place. And then I put, this is how it feels to really give everything, give your all, knowing that that is what makes things great. So it made me understand that this limitation, this lack of permission, is preventing us from being all of who we can be. And knowing that when we step into that all of who we can be, that's when our work truly is great. So think about that idea of giving yourself permission. Explore it in your weekend ahead. Explore it in your work, in your writing, in your art. And anytime you feel yourself coming up against those boundaries, just stop and just say, what would it be if I gave myself permission right now? Where would I be able to roam?